Again, welcome back and all that. Um, I'd like to start today by reading a scripture, and it is in 1 John, that is the epistle of 1 John, chapter 1, verse 3 and 4. It says, "We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. We write this to make our joy complete." One of the most positive, growing, strengthening experiences we have is to share our testimony about what God's done in our life. And I've been thinking about this all week, reminiscing on those first couple of years as a Christian and what God did in my life. I don't know what you're going to think. I'm not sure how detailed I'm going to be in this. I'm just going to speak it as it comes to my heart, and how I went from being a bartender, as I talked about in the first section, all the way to being an executive in the steel construction business in Houston. When I became a Christian, I was working as a bartender, as I said. But it wasn't long before I realized that, hey, this is really a conflict of interest, trying to be a bartender, make a living as a bartender, and live a Christian life. I did it for a while, or I tried to do it for a while, and it made it real clear to me that I just couldn't do it. So anyhow, as I prayed, I crossed paths with a Christian man, who had a contract drafting service. He asked me, he said, you know anything about drafting? And that's one thing that I really knew a lot about. I excelled at drafting when I was in school, took a lot of classes. I have a natural talent for it. And I said, sure, I can do that. And he says, well, I can get you a job. I don't remember how much it was back in those days, $10 an hour or whatever, as a trainee. And use your talents, and you can probably climb the ladder pretty quick if you're talented. And so I said, sure, do that. Let's do it. So he got me a couple small jobs, got my feet wet. One of them is just right down the street from my church, and I pass it all the time. And I think back to those days as my first job. And another one is a couple blocks over. So I'm in the same neighborhood. Anyhow, I did that for a little while, and he called me and said, hey, I've got another one for you that's a little bit better, permanent job. And it's with a steel fabrication company. And I said, sure. So the ad read steel drafting trainee. And what a steel drafting, or what a steel draftsman does, is they take the drawings for a building, and then they draw the pieces for the steel shop to build that building. And all the bolt holes and connections and what have you. And I said, okay, no problem. So I go to show up for this job the first day, and it's a little small shop up on off I-45 in North Houston. And I walk in, nice fella, owned the business. And he said, and at this point, I had never seen a set of commercial blueprints. But anyhow, I walked in the door, and I'm expecting to have a trainer, somebody to teach me. And he says, okay, well, here is the job that we have to do. And here's one that's very similar that we just finished. Here's the design drawings. Here's the shop drawings. So just look at those and do the drawings for this job. And by the way, the shop is waiting for the drawings downstairs. And I mean, I was just blown away. I mean, how do you do this? But I figured it out. I prayed. I was a new Christian. Everything was new. I prayed about everything I did. I prayed about everything I did. Anyhow, and I knew God had opened this door. So here I was in this little upstairs office over the shop and started doing these drawings. Now, the previous job that they did, everything was square with each other. And on this new job, everything was on a skew, on angles, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, 30 degrees, what have you. So this is a whole different world. I had to not only do a similar job, I had to learn how to work compound angles and what have you. Basically, I, who was a poor student in everything but drafting, had to go back and relearn trigonometry and figure all this stuff out. Anyhow, I went out and bought to a bookstore and bought a little shop math book and sat down and started doing my work. And I went ahead and did drawings. I made a lot of mistakes. I would do one piece and give it to the shop, and they'd fabricate it, but then I'm doing the next piece that connects to it and realize something that I'd missed on the first piece and go back downstairs. Wait a minute, we have to change this. And they were very patient with me. And in all honesty, I never should have been put in a position like that. But God knows what he's doing. And I had to learn this. And by the time I finished that job, I knew nothing about industry standards. I knew connections between the steel book, steel manual, and the previous job. I figured all that out, but I didn't know anything about how to number things, how to do erection drawings, how to do any of that stuff. But and because I didn't know those things, I had to go with the steel out in the field. And as they put it together, I had to show them how to put this piece with that piece and what have you. And it was a real circus, but really it worked out well. The job was down in Ingleside, which is down southwest of Houston, southeast of Houston on the way to Corpus. But I went down there and spent a couple days with them, and we got the job together. And by the time I finished that job, I had a pretty good understanding of at least the steel business as I knew it. And so I did that, and then we got another job, and they, I don't know, obviously they were impressed with me and asked me, did I want to start pricing new work now that I knew what I was doing? And so I said, sure. So I began pricing new jobs and didn't know what I was doing. And again, didn't really have a trainer, but I knew enough about the steel business that I could figure about how long it took to do this, how long it took to. Anyhow, I started putting together quotes, but in putting together my quotes, it was more prayer than anything. As a matter of fact, I would come up with a ballpark number of what I thought that job was worth. And then I'd write down 4 or 5 similar numbers and pray, like a small number of 10,000, 10,500, then 11,000, 11. And then I would sit down and pray, okay, God, which one of these should I put in? And every time I hit these things right on the money. I got so famous in Houston for my estimates because back in those days, there was some good old boy stuff going on, but most people, especially new fabricators, or people, I was a new fabricator. I was new on the circuit. You didn't get last looks, or you didn't get any coaching from your customers on where you need to be. So every job I was quoting, I was just low bidder by a couple dollars. It was amazing. So amazing that I was getting calls from everybody in town. And I was being accused of giving money to people to get insights into what the numbers should be. I was getting calls from steel suppliers. I became, I don't want to call myself a celebrity, but I became well known in Houston in the commercial fabrication market. Anyhow, I did that and became, within probably 6 months after I started, I was running the company that I was working for. Nice fellow working there, but he had interests in other things. He had a nightclub and he had some other things. So he was looking for somebody to kind of carry the load for him in the steel. But so anyhow, I was running the company. And then I started getting offers from other companies. I had, I don't want to be negative, but I was not in agreement with how the owner of the company was spending the profits, and got to a point where I turned down most of the offers that I got to go to other companies. But I got to a point where I said, hey, this is not going to go anywhere. And so I took an offer from another company, and it was a big steel erection company, erecting high-rise buildings. And I went to work for them. And same thing, I started bidding work, didn't know anything about it. But here I was, I hadn't even been in the business a year. And I was managing, I think when I got there, I was managing about 6 or 8 high-rise buildings. I'm talking 20 stories or more. A couple in Houston, a couple in Dallas. And I was setting the world on fire. Wasn't making a lot of money. But anyhow, I just let God. Yeah, let me back that up. I was so naive. I was so uneducated in what I was doing. I was learning it. I was doing my best to learn it, but I was so naive. I was so dependent on God. Show me what to do here. God, show me what to do here. And as long as I did that, I was climbing the ladder. Anyhow, I stayed with that erection company for a year, and turned out that the owner of that company was skimming IRS money, and he got in trouble. And the guy that I had originally worked for was continually asking me to come back. And I said, okay. I said, if I can run the company totally and be in control of all the money, I'll come back. So I did. I went back to the original company, and went out and got a bunch of work in a time when there was no work. This was the 80s, early 80s, when the oil boom was over in Houston, and there was not a lot of commercial work going on. But I had made such a name for myself. I had about four or five good-sized projects that I just got, real quick, because that was a fact of life. If I was going to go back to that company, they had no work. I had to get some work to put in the shop. Anyhow, I did that. Like I said, got 4 or 5 contracts. And one of them was the big UPS facility down in Stafford, which was a big job. And anyhow, I got the work. We started getting the shop drawings done. And I started looking at the books and realized this guy is broke. He just doesn't have any work. He's broke. And I said it would take 5 good years to get him back to just even. And I told him, I says, hey, we just can't do this. And he says, well, why don't you go out and look for some money? And so I did, and got to know some people, met with some bankers, met with some business owners, and they were impressed enough with what I had done in Houston over the last couple of years that they come on, come on, we'll be partners with you. But they didn't want the guy that that I had originally worked for, and then worked for again. And they said, he's a liability. And I said, man, but this is the guy. And I was being very loyal, really loved the guy, close to his family. We went skiing together. And I didn't want to cut him loose. But it became very obvious that I wasn't going to find a partner for us that wanted to include him. And the other thing, the clock was ticking on these projects that we got, that I had made a commitment to the customer. Okay, yeah, we'll get this fabricated and delivered. So I had to figure out how I was going to do that and get it done. So anyhow, pretty much everything I was doing in Houston, well, I was like in a fishbowl. Everybody was watching me. And I get a call one day from a man who had been a big player in the oil rig or drilling rig business. Had a big facility, and oil rigs was very similar in their operation to commercial steel fabrication. He had a huge shop, no work. I had lots of work and no shop. So I was very naive. This guy was a fox. He saw me coming and said, hey, I'll give you 40% of the business if you want to come bring your work over here. So I did, and we instantly became a player in Houston. We did that one job, and then I had the opportunity to hire one or two other estimators that I had worked with in the past. So we were rocking and rolling. We were the players in Houston. And about this time, and again, this is all God. This is not me strategically sitting down and figuring out my plans. This is me just going through doors as God opened them. So I get a call one day from one of the big Houston, or wasn't in Houston, it's a national general contractor that had an office in Houston. And they had the contract to manage the construction of the George R. Brown Convention Center downtown Houston. And it was a big job. It was one of the biggest jobs that had been in Houston. And they said, called me in and patted me on the head and built my ego. Hey, we hear about you. We hear all these good things. And we need someone to help us but put together budget numbers for the city of Houston on the George R. Brown. And we want to pick you as the one to do the steel. And I said, oh, yeah, no problem. That's great. I'd love to do that. And they continued to pat me on the head and what have you. So I'm getting ready to leave, and they said, well, we didn't even look at the job. But they said, you've got 30 days. We need the drawings back. No, we don't need the drawings back. We need a price from you in 30 days of what it's going to take to fabricate and erect all the steel in George R. Brown. At that time, it was phase one. Now there's two phases there. And I said, great. And they said, we'll get some help to get you the drawings down to your car. And I said, hey, I can handle it. And they said, no, I'm not sure you can. And I said, well, where are they? And they took me into this room, and there's 6 rolls of drawings this big, and I think 2 full boxes of specifications. And I looked at that, and my mouth had to have dropped. Anyhow, they carried them down to the car for me and put them in my car, and I was speechless. And anyhow, I took the drawings home, put them on my dining room table, which was right as you come in the house. You have to pass it. And I laid them on my dining room table and freaked out and didn't even open them. Didn't open them for a week. Every time I'd walk in the door, I'd look over there at those drawings and I'd say, what am I going to do? Everybody's eyes are watching me of what I'm going to do. How, I can't give the drawings back. You know, this thing is so far over my head. There's no way I can do this. Anyhow, after a week of that, and just, I don't remember whether I lost sleep or not, but I know that was the center of my thoughts for a week. And finally I said, well, let me open these things and look at them. So I did. And somehow God relayed to me that, hey, this is a big job, but there's also 6 smaller jobs within it. You've got, and I don't want to get into technical stuff, but you've got structural steel, you've got pipe trusses, you've got regular trusses, you got miscellaneous, you got stairs, anyhow, there was about 6 packages. And and it came to me. I said, if I go out and get the best person, the best fabricator in each one of these 6 specialties, and then let them do the pricing for me, I come out as a star, and no problem, we're done. So that's what I did. And I had people flying in from the largest pipe roller or plate roller in the country at that time was Marathon. I hate to use names. I've already said it. Marathon Laterno in Vicksburg, Mississippi. And there's a big truss manufacturer. There was ornamental manufacturers in Alabama. Anyhow, I had people coming from all over the United States to look at this job. Anyhow, we did it. I had a big erector, one of the biggest erectors in the world, down in New Orleans. I went down and met with him, and questionable ties, but anyhow, I went down to meet with him, and he took me out to lunch, and I felt like I was out with, anyhow, but it was an experience. So we had to figure out how to put this thing together. I remember me and one of the erectors walking Texas Avenue because we knew that it couldn't be fabricated. It had to be fabricated outside of Houston, or at least outside of that area. And we said, well, we'll bring it in from the ship channel. So we figured out a path that we could bring in these pipe trusses that were 40 feet by 110 feet. Anyhow, we put this thing together, and the final budget was 18.75, I believe, $1 million for a guy that had not done anything more than about 400,000. But anyhow, it put me on the map. Everybody knew that I had priced it. I was getting calls from all the biggest contractors from all over the world, at least all over the United States, were trying to get this job. And I was the guy with the information about the steel. So anyhow, before it was over, again, I was naive, and the general contractor that got it used me, picked my brain, and they had already made a deal with somebody else to do the job. But that was okay, in hindsight. We impressed, me and my team that bid this thing were the talk of the town again. And we had spread to the talk of almost to the country. I know we had people come in from Alabama, from DC, from Chicago, from LA. We had people from all over trying to bid this job. Anyhow, so we didn't get the job. We nailed the price of it, less than 1%. We were within 1% of what it actually went for. So we were a star with the town, to the point where that company that I was helping asked me and offered me a very lucrative job. But, I said, man, I got through this one, but there's no way I'm going to get through another job with them. So I just said, no, thanks. Thank you, but no thanks. Anyhow, but I started getting calls from contractors all over the United States asking me to price their work. And that went on for a couple of years. Again, we were knocking them dead. I mean, we had 3 shifts, 75 guys working around the clock, and nobody else had work. and we're working 3 shifts. Anyhow, I think, as I said earlier, my partner, I think he saw me, he had a plan from day one. We were making a lot of money. The value of our company had gotten up over $2 million. And I own 40% of over $2 million in value. And I guess he was ready to exercise his plan and started ridiculing me and just treating me like trash in front of all the other employees. And I mean, I know as Christians, we need to be humble. And I felt like I was humble. And I felt like everybody in the place knew that I, I was right and he was wrong. But I got to the point where I was going home with a knot in my stomach every day. And because it was just wrong. It wasn't. Anyhow, I started asking God in April of '86. I said, Lord, what do I do? You set me up here. We've got a successful business. How do I do this in a way? How do I fix this? And started praying about it in April and felt like God was telling me I needed to just leave. And I'm not talking about a legal battle. I'm not talking about anything other than packing my ditty bag and going home. And well, at that time, I wasn't making big money. I was making like $700 a week. I had a company car. I had benefits. I back in those days, that wasn't bad. But I just said, Lord, I'm walking away from close to $1 million. But that went on. I started in April. I continued through October praying. If you're a Christian, you understand what a fleece is. A fleece is putting out something and asking God to give you a sign, whether or not he's for it or against it. Anyhow, I put out fleece after fleece after fleece. I prayed and prayed and prayed to the point where I had people walking up to me unsolicited saying that the Bible means by being unequally yoked. That's not necessarily just about husband and wife. It's about business partners too. And I said, what? And I mean, how could they know? Because I didn't spread it around what I was doing. I didn't want it to get out on the street. But God sent me people trying to give me wisdom. And finally, beginning of October, I said, yeah, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to walk away from it. And I had a little bit of a big head because a lot of people were calling me, asking me to do business with them. So I said, yeah, I'll probably be okay. As much as I hate to walk away from $1 million, I'll probably be okay. So the beginning of October, I started planning my exit. And I started every day in my briefcase, I'd take a little bit home. And every day I would but I would delegate my duties to other people on the staff to where by the time I got to the end of October, everything that I was doing, I had delegated out to someone else. I had taken everything home except a couple paintings on the wall. And so I came in, it was on Halloween morning. My wife followed me to work so that I could leave the company car there. And I had written just a little, we weren't using computers back in those days. So I wrote a little handwritten thing, say, I hereby give you my 40% if I never have to see you or talk to you again. And he looked at it and scribbled his name on there and gave it back to me. And I walked out the door, and that's the last time I ever talked to the guy. And nobody had a clue. Nobody had a clue that I was going. And so anyhow, I walked out the door, and that was, as I said, the 31st of October, Halloween of 1986. Well, I had a couple jobs. I'd confided in a couple of my customers that, I was going to go out on my own and I needed something to do. So I had a couple little small jobs to do. Um, but that didn't last long. And I wasn't in debt, but I didn't have much saved. Um, and here it came. The day was the 10th of December. Here it was. We didn't have money for groceries. I had no work. Christmas was about to come. We hadn't done any Christmas shopping, had 5 kids at home. And I said, Lord, I'm here because you told me to do what I did. And I was on my knees. I wasn't just talking. I was on my knees in my office, in my house, praying in tears. Lord, I did this. I trusted you. I was convinced. I mean, you showed me over and over and over again. This is exactly what you wanted me to do. And I was about to say amen, and the phone rang. Or please deliver me. Amen. Please do something. Amen. I was grasping at anything. And as I was saying that, the phone rang. And it was a guy. Matter of fact, a friend of mine that I just recently saw. I saw him yesterday. That worked for one of my customers. And he says, hey, we got an emergency. He said, we just finished a building and it's got a 6-story parking garage, and we made the walls of the parking garage 6 inches shorter than what code requires. We need a 6-inch railing all the way around all 6 floors of the parking garage. And I said, Scott, his name is Scott. I said, Scott, I don't even have the money to buy material. He says, be here in 30 minutes and I'll have a check for you. And this is December 10th. And I went down there and we figured out what we were going to do. I went out and found a guy that did those kinds of rails and who was somebody that I knew and worked with. And they're waiting. They finished this building. Matter of fact, I'll even tell you what building it is. It was the IRS building down on Beach Nut and Highway 59. If you look in the parking garage, you'll see our little 6-inch rail all the way around the parking garage walls. Anyhow, I said, we got to get this done like now, overnight. And because they finished the job, they can't get their money until they get their occupancy permit, and it's getting ready to be the holiday. So anyhow, we finished the job on Christmas Eve and got a check and had one of the best Christmases we ever had. And by January 10th, I had enough work and had cash in the bank. I think we had $10,000 in the bank by the 10th of January. So sometimes it seems like God's just leaving you hanging, but usually if you give him the opportunity, there's going to be, he's going to give you more than what you expect. So at this point, I am now self-employed, no partners, just totally self-employed, and for the next 30 years became a player in the Houston steel industry, commercial steel. And took some breaks, went to Honduras, went to Ghana in West Africa, became a home builder, and had an amazing, similar testimony there, only I wasn't quite as holy there as I was when I was in Houston starting out. But God blessed me there. And I pretty much lived a life living for God and going on mission trips and what have you, and using the money that I was blessed with to do things for other Christian organizations. So I'm going to stop at this point. We have one more segment that we have committed to, and that'll be next week. and we'll talk about some other testimonies of what happened after that, the next 30 years. We've obviously now become missionaries in Honduras, and it's even gone beyond that, but I don't want to get into that. We'll save that for next time. So thank you for being with us. Talk to you next time. Thanks.